This is Home Wisdom at makeamericagreatagain.org. I'm making these videos because I'm on the native reservation, the Oyate Reservation. Before I came out here, I notified a sex trafficking coalition in the Chicago, Indiana area that if I went missing, it would not be a result of me dancing at clubs. It would be a result of the government itself kidnapping women. Our own government is involved in trafficking women, and they will try to scapegoat the problem on other people and frame people. They'll try to frame clubs, particularly cabaret and strip clubs. Some of the clubs do traffic, and same with the massage parlors, but there's so many different facilities in America that are trafficking under fronts, false business fronts, that it's very easy to scapegoat the obvious ones like massage parlors and strip clubs, but the reality is that a lot of times it's our police and own government that are trafficking people. And there's several videos on YouTube where reporters are covering the felony warrant system. Our felony warrant system, America has some of the highest rates of people incarcerated right now, and that doesn't even include people who are charged with crimes that might be under house arrest or and some of those people deserve it, but the problem is that a lot of those people are just easy targets. They're vulnerable people that are displaced and in another part of the country that they don't know anybody at. And the police need to stop picking on vulnerable people if you want to stop sex trafficking, because sex trafficking is exactly what that is kidnapping and enslaving vulnerable people. So if the government wants to stop it, then do not maliciously, recklessly, and carelessly just serve up felony warrants to everybody you can possibly charge. And for example, I'm on the Oyate Reservation in South Dakota. I don't care anymore. I might go missing. I already know people are. The FBI here is not really the FBI. It's an organized crime. This is the mafia here. I know the history of Chicago because I'm born and raised from Chicago area. I know that when in the 1970s, the Chicago machine became so powerful that Washington D.C. was threatened by the power in Chicago, and they didn't want Chicago to run Washington D.C. and so what they did was before Chicago got more powerful than Washington D.C. came into the Chicago and broke up the mafia, because the mafia was so infiltrated. It was into the FBI and federal government. That part of the federal government was really working for the mafia instead of working for the Washington D.C. And so it's the same thing. What happened after that, I know the history, and there's papers from the Freedom of Information Act. There's papers on Google documents from the CIA that wrote that the machine was broken up and dispersed. And they know that remnants of it still exist. They mentioned Iowa and Nevada. I know that South Dakota is actually another state where the mafia, I think the old remnants of the Chicago mafia run. So Chicago isn't running this area. It's the other way around. South Dakota is kidnapping people and trying to force people to live here. The government, it's just scary to know that the government is actually probably the largest contributor to actual trafficking, because traffickers don't kidnap people directly anymore. If you're smart, what you do is get the police to get somebody arrested for having drugs on them. The traffickers, when they traffic victims, they hook women on drugs, so their bodies are capable of having sex with multiple people a day, and those women, when they want to leave, they're slaves and they want to leave the situation, and the police are aware that they're sleeping in beds full of needles and nobody comes to rescue them. They assume they're lowlives that are going to die in the bed full of needles, but they're profiting from it. They're profiting from the women that are having sex with multiple men a day, because the women are so out of it they can't keep their profits because they're slaves. And it's in the pimp's interest to administer drugs to these people so that they can so that those victims can continue having sex with multiple men a day. This is making me sick talking about it, because I'm by myself right now and I'm out here. But what I'm trying to say is, none of this is of an issue to the government, that these women and people are sleeping in beds full of needles, until they take a car and they get into their car and they try to escape and go back to their home state, or where they're safe, where they're from, and suddenly having a little tiny amount of heroin becomes a huge deal. It becomes a felony. And the pimp will call the police knowing that his sex worker has escaped, and he doesn't want her to escape, so he will call the police and say, I know this car, license plate number, whatever, and this woman has blah 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 amount of heroin on her, because nobody can quit cold turkey if they're that far into drugs. They would actually die. So the result is that the police will pick up the woman that's escaping the sex slave trade and basically kidnap her back into the city where the pimp is, where the pimp wants her to be, using the felony orchestrated warrant system, and charge her with a felony. And if she's at the mercy of the pimp now, who can bail her out and have money for an attorney to get her out, and guess where she's at? She's right in the hands of the pimp. So when our society maliciously, recklessly, and carelessly serves felony charges to people, and especially people who are displaced and vulnerable, what they're actually doing is trafficking women and victims for pimps, and they're involved directly in human trafficking. And so the nature of the police abusing power and going after vulnerable people just because they're easier targets rather than a higher intellectual awareness and a more organized fight for good is sex trafficking. The police are kidnapping and trafficking women for the pimps. So if the pimp gets his victim in the felony system, when she goes to her parents at home, her parents can be losing their houses or everything they have for harboring a fugitive, because that's the legal term. And that is why many sex trafficking coalitions in America are working towards sex trafficking courts. If a state is capable, or a city is capable of putting a felony charge on somebody, then that person, who, if they live somewhere else or from somewhere else, they should be capable of moving that charge, that felony charge, to the state that they live at, because to deal with it there, where there will not be organized crime and mafia corruption. And this is what I noticed in the state of South Dakota. I'm suspecting New Mexico was involved. Texas might be. I mean, every state has sex trafficking problems, and they have slightly different ways of doing it. And there's millions of ways to sex traffic people. So my next video is going to be about the energy that fuels sex trafficking, because until the energy that fuels sex trafficking is recognized and consciously banished, like a demon would be banishing a demon, or it's confronted and acknowledged and stopped, the sex trafficking in America will continue, and it will remain hidden on most levels, because that's what darkness is hidden evil. And I'm just trying to shine a little bit of light. I know I'm not prepared to talk about this. I'm sick. This issue is giving me pneumonia. It's making me sick. I know it's spiritual. I've had a lot of spiritual things happen to me since then. So if you're watching this video and you care about sex trafficking, just pray that I'm safe. Because people that talk, most victims of sex trafficking are silent. They don't have a voice. And they go missing when they try to speak up about it.